trillion underground debt market all begins with what's called foreign exchange swaps, or I guess more simply put, a currency swap. See, here's the thing. Even though the US dollar is held as the world's reserve currency, the banking system to a large degree is interconnected. For instance, companies in the US might want to do business overseas. European banks might want to borrow money to fund a project in California. And I want to mention my free newsletter down below in the description because I'm able to cover a lot of these topics in a lot more detail. So what do companies do if they want to fund a project outside of their own country? Well, if they're in the US, they could just take the US dollar and exchange that into something else, but that exposes them to exchange rate risk, especially if the US dollar increases or loses its value. The second, they can also just borrow the money that they need in another country, but those interest rates might not be as low as what they have here, so a currency swap is usually the best choice. When this happens, a US company could borrow money in US dollars, swap currency with a foreign company who needs those US dollars, and a middleman facilitates the transaction to ensure that the process goes smoothly. Essentially, this allows companies and banks to finance their borrowing at favorable interest rates without having to worry about borrowing in one currency and then paying it back with another. However, the issue today is that the $80 trillion of currency swaps are not required to be reported on company balance sheets. And with so much money potentially at risk, there could be some serious complications throughout our entire economy. So this is what's happening. As Bloomberg explains, this shadow banking system could all begin with the US Treasury market. These are loans made to the US government, and in exchange for giving them your money, you get paid back anywhere between 4 to 5% in interest, depending on the term. But here's where the $80 trillion of hidden debt comes in. Other countries see the US dollar as a safe haven asset, and so when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates faster than the rest of the world, other countries begin to buy up those US Treasuries as a hedge against their own currency, and so currency swaps are often used. Now, in theory, these loans would be fully backed because it would be no different than me giving you $10 American and you giving me back $14 Canadian. In that situation, we both hold the exact same amount of value and we each promise to pay each other back at the end of the term. Although the trouble comes when short-term borrowing is used to buy long-term assets. And by the time those short-term obligations come due, there might not be enough dollars available to pay them back. Listen, if that sounds extremely confusing, here's a very simple example. Let's assume that someone is selling you the rights to buy a property that pays 5% interest for 2 years and they only want 10 silver coins as payment. But you don't have 10 silver coins, you only have $10 in cash. In that case, you go to the silver pawn shop and you lend your $10 in exchange for 10 silver coins with the promise that you'll give back those 10 silver coins exactly 1 year later. At that moment, you haven't gained or lost any money. You still have $10 worth of silver, the pawn shop still has your $10 worth of cash, and as long as each of you repay your debts, you'll have the exact same amount that you started with. Now that's definitely a very oversimplified example for the sake of getting a complex topic across, but given just how much money is at stake, the real question becomes, is this something we should be concerned about, especially when the IFF says that a recession is imminent? Well, the answer is, it depends. If everything goes perfectly and everybody repays back their debts or rolls them over into the future, then nothing is going to happen and everything will continue on as usual. But with the US dollar making up 88% of those transactions, that might cause other countries to print more of their own currency to swap, thereby causing even higher overseas inflation and causing demand for the dollar to rise even more. Or even worse, that would require other countries to sell their assets to pay for more dollars, which would also crash the market. But the biggest issue isn't so much what we already know about, it's what we don't know about. And since none of this is required to be reported on company